everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to this week's reading vlog. So we have now entered the last week of May, and I actually filmed my TBR today, so I've got that ready to be edited, and I'm getting ready for Whatever-a-thon, and I'm really excited about that and being on Team Sunset Scholars. Hopefully, I will be able to be an asset to my team. I have quite the potential TBR picked out, so we'll see how it goes. I know I read 75 books last year. I'm curious to see how close to that mark I get this year, because there's a part of me that wants to top it. It's a small part, but there is a part of me that wants to find some way to read 76. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I just don't think my brain can handle reading 76 books in a month. I'm still not sure how I read 75 last year, but that's for next week. I will actually probably include the 30th and the 31st in this vlog so that I can start Whatever-a-thon with the first week. So this is actually more of a 9-day reading vlog, so hopefully you all will enjoy that. Last night before bed, I read some more of The Veiled Throne. I'm now on page 97 and I've officially entered part 2. I'm starting to get a feel for what is going on and who we're following and getting some of the characters straight in my head. I'm enjoying this, but again, still a ways to go, so we'll see how it turns out. My other reading plans for this month are to finish Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms, finish Aurora Burning, and finish the 1619 Project. And then, as these are a part of my TBR, I have to read both The Stars Beneath Our Feet and Fish in a Tree. I haven't started either one of these, but I don't think they're going to be particularly hard to read. And then if I get time, I am going to try to read The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I've heard mixed things about this, so I'm curious to see if it's something I enjoy. I've liked the other 2 books I've read by her, so hopefully I'll enjoy this one as well. But I think that is my plan for the end of the month, is to read this giant stack of books. Now, granted, I think I could read these, and honestly, the rest of this, none of these should take me that long. If I get into this won't take me that long, though. If I don't like it, I'll struggle. But I can DNF it because it's not a 5-star prediction or winner cover or anything like that. I think that this should be relatively easy, even though the size. But as long as I make some progress on it every day, I think I should be fine. This just requires me sitting down and reading it because I know I loved it the first time. It's just that it tends to mess with my allergies. I think the hard one is going to be this one because there's a lot to take in. And because it's nonfiction, I read it a little bit slower. But I'm feeling confident that I can get through this one as well. So that is my plan for the rest of this month. Hopefully everything goes, well, according to plan. And I will be ready and raring to go for Whatever-a-thon. But I can't do that if I don't go read. And, well, I should probably go do that. So I will check back in with you all later when maybe I have access to my bed, which I don't right now because he don't share. When he's in the bed, I'm not allowed in it. So I will check back in with you all soon. So it is now Saturday, and I thought I would check in. I've done quite a bit of reading since I last talked to you. First up, I've made some progress in the 1619 project. I am now on page 387, so I have about 100 pages left, and this book just breaks my heart. I think that's what I'm getting from this, is I just keep reading about how we as a country have continually mistreated Black people for our entire history, and realizing just how much of it is been sent down through the generations, and how those generations weren't all that long ago. Like, my parents were in school in the 60s, and I realized that if I was the child of a Black person, my parents would have had to deal with segregation. Like, that's how short of a time period it was that some of this was still going on. Like, some of the stuff we say today is absolutely ridiculous, and we can't believe that ever happened. It wasn't all that long ago. They talked about in here a church bombing that killed some girls who were my parents' age. They were bombing a Black church solely because the people in the church were Black. And those poor innocent children who died were my parents' age. And the realization that, like, it's not that far removed from people today, and that trauma is still being felt. It's been passed down from generation to generation, and seeing how it affects every part of their lives. Like, I just read a chapter on music and how it affects even the music industry and people like Beyonce. And it's just so crazy to me to get this viewpoint, because I had no idea that this was happening. I had never looked at it like that. And I'm so glad that my eyes are starting to be opened to some things that weren't as obvious, because there are obvious forms of racism. There are people who run around in white hoods as part of the KKK and want to use derogatory language like the N-word, and that is very, very obvious. But not all forms of racism are obvious. And there are ways to be racist where you don't even realize you're doing it. It's a preconceived notion that was passed down to you. And I believe it was in here. I mean, I've been reading a lot of things with everything going on in the world right now, like the Buffalo shooting and then the Uvalde shooting, and just seeing all of this. And one of the things that was pointed out to me is that you could take two people whose backgrounds were exactly the same. There was nothing different about them on paper. And one is white and one is Black. And more times, people would think that the Black person was more likely to be a threat than the white person. And the only difference between the two of them could be the color of their skin. And that is a preconceived notion, a preconceived form of racism that has been passed down through the generations. And it's just crazy to me. Like, the fact that people don't realize that that is still happening, and understanding that that is why we find ourselves in some of these situations. Like, one of the things I saw is that in the Uvalde shooting, the kid was able to go into the school and he had a gun and they did nothing. And yet, how many times have we heard about an unarmed Black person being shot because they thought he had a weapon? And it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that this is still going on. And that was another thing. Like, they talked about the fact that the Buffalo shooter was 18 and he was a white teenager. But then I saw reports of people who were pointing out 18-year-old Black people ended up being labeled as Black men. They were adults. A Black adult is 18, but a white 18-year-old is a teenager, which again is a thing that shouldn't be happening. Either they're both adults or they're both teenagers. You have to judge them by the same brush. And I'm just so glad I read this, especially with everything going on. It just feels so topical. And I know I've mentioned it in vlogs before, but it's connecting with me on so many different levels, and not just about the stuff that Black people are going through. And as somebody who is non-binary and ace, I can sympathize with the worry of being treated because you are not a cisgendered white male. And granted, I will never be able to understand what it is like to walk out the door and worry that I'm going to be targeted because of the color of my skin. I have white skin. I will be perceived as white. I don't have that worry, but I can sympathize to some extent about the idea of being targeted for something that you cannot change about yourself, for something you cannot control, and for other people's hatred of things that they deem different. And I would highly recommend you check out this book. It is so interesting and informative and has really got me thinking about so many different things, and I am very, very glad that I decided to pick it up. I also made some progress on The Veiled Throne. I am now on page 228, so I still have a ways to go, but I am really enjoying this. I now remember what was going on in the characters that we're following, and I'm starting to get into the story and get attached to the people we're meeting and what is going on, because I needed a little bit of a refresher based on where we left off in the last book, because it's been a little bit. But I'm enjoying this. I don't enjoy it as much as like A Chorus of Dragons, which is one of my favorite series ever, but I am enjoying this. This feels like it's probably going to get a 4-star, just like the rest of the books in the series, unless something massively changes. But I do still have a giant chunk of the book, so it is possible. I should be able to finish this before the end of May with no problem, though. So I'm quite excited to continue to read this. I've made no more progress on Aurora Burning, but I do plan to read this today. I've taken my allergy meds, so I'm hoping that if I read it closer to when I take my allergy meds, it won't bother my allergies quite so much, but we'll see. I've yet to pick up Stars Beneath Our Feet, but I plan to do that tomorrow because based on the amount of pages I have left to read, I need to read about 400 pages a day. And tomorrow is an AEW pay-per-view day, so I will not be reading from about probably like 6:30 to midnight. So I'll have to have had all my reading done prior to that. So I purposely saved this book because I think it will help me gain quite a bit of my pages for tomorrow's, because it is going to be far easier to read, say, 200 pages of this than 200 pages of this, or the 100 pages I have left in this. Like, it's just going to be a quicker read because it's a middle grade contemporary as opposed to a nonfiction or an adult high fantasy. So I haven't picked this yet up, but I have a plan for this. There's a reason I haven't picked it up. And then I've managed to finish 3 books. So I'll go with the one I like the most first, and that's Fish in a Tree. In this book, we're following Allie, and she has dyslexia, but she doesn't know it. She just knows she can't read, and when she tries to read, the words swim around the pages, and she thinks that's normal, and none of her teachers have caught it. And her teacher is actually going out on maternity leave, so she gets a substitute teacher, and he does things a little bit differently and sees past her inability to read and the way she kind of covers for that and the way it seems to some people like she's acting out, and gets to see the bright child that she is. And I just really, really enjoyed this book. I think it's very, very important for kids to read because it will hopefully give them a better understanding of some of their classmates, because I'm sure that even though maybe I didn't know it, I can't imagine that in my time in school, I didn't come into contact with somebody who was dyslexic or had reading problems. And maybe this would have made me a little more understanding, and maybe I would have noticed it in somebody. Or again, if it's a book that a child reads, because there are audiobooks, so even if they have trouble physically reading, that doesn't mean they couldn't listen to the book. Maybe it would help explain to them why they're having so many problems reading printed words. So I think I'm going like 4.5 stars on this, and I would highly recommend it and think it was a great read and very important for middle graders to have access to. Then I read Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms, and I think I'm going like 3 stars on this. I wanted to enjoy this much more than I did. So we're following Cameron, who ends up going to Chidani, which is like an ancient realm. Oh, it's a fabled kingdom that cut itself off from the rest of the world to save the Igbo people from danger. So it deals a lot with like slavery and the things that happened to African Americans with the slave trade and becoming enslaved and the life they led once they got to America. And basically the gods or whatever cut this section of people off to protect them from that fate. And this book has been passed down through Cameron's family, and they're kind of the defenders of this land and the portal between worlds. And he ends up going through the portal to Chidani with 2 of his friends and finding out that he has to get some magical artifacts back from the queen's sister, because if he doesn't, it means that the portal could be breached and monsters from this world could go into his world. And I really did want to enjoy it more than I did, but I didn't particularly like Cameron or his friends. I didn't feel like there was character development that I was looking for. The plot seemed super interesting, but it also seemed very, very rushed. And I don't know, I think I wanted more from it. I wanted to like it more than I did, and I just didn't. I was pretty bored. It was a slog to get through despite being short. I think I'm going 3 stars because like I didn't hate it, but it wasn't my favorite book, and I know it's the first book in a series, but I don't really have any desire to pick up the second one. So 3 stars, I guess. And then the last book I've made progress on is the Book of Cold Cases. I actually finished it, and I think I'm going 2 stars. At the beginning of this book, I really enjoyed it. So we're following Shay, who likes to read up on cold cases, and one of the most interesting to her is the Lady Killer, which was a woman who shot and killed 2 men in cold blood, and there was a suspect named Beth who was brought to trial but was found innocent, and the real killer was never found. Evidence was never found that showed conclusively whether Beth did it or not, and she ends up interviewing Beth and starting to find out the story of what was happening in Beth's life and what was going on in that time, while trying to piece together whether Beth is really the killer or not. And I just did not like Beth. I did not particularly like Shay, and I did not like the way this kind of came together, and I can't really explain why, because, well, it's a thriller, so, you know, that would be a massive spoiler, but there was certain things that were happening, and I thought they were going to play out one way, and they didn't, so I didn't like how the book ended, and this book just wasn't for me. I liked her other 2 works that I've read, but this one didn't work for me. So that's it for my update. Like I said, I hope to finish the 4 books that I'm in the midst of before the end of the month. Well, the 3 books I'm in the midst of, and then The Stars Beneath Our Feet, which I haven't started yet. But this is my goal for the rest of the month, and hopefully I will be able to read them. And I will check back in with you when I have something done, or on the 31st, whichever comes first. And yeah, I'm going to go read now. is Monday morning, so it is time to wrap this vlog up. I did not finish all 4 books like I set out to, but I finished the 3 that mattered the most. So I finished Our Stars Beneath Our Feet, and I think I'm going to go like 3.5 stars. We're following this boy named Lolly whose brother has died, and he is really struggling with his grief in the aftermath of that. And this wasn't my favorite book, but there were things I liked about it. Like, I didn't like the way some of the characters treated other characters in a middle grade book because some of it was mean and borderlining on bullying. And one of those characters happened to be our main character, Lolly. But I also know that, like, Lolly was angry because he had lost his brother. So some of the reason he was behaving the way he was due to his anger, and he kind of had to work through that. So I struggle with whether I liked the way that played out or not. I liked seeing him dive into Legos as a way to kind of deal with and move through his grief. I think it was really important to show this side of things because he is in, I believe it's Harlem. It's Harlem. And I've never been to Harlem, so I don't know how true this is, but the author claims to have wanted to really try to bring Harlem to life and what it would be like to be a young, grieving Black boy in Harlem. And it talks about, in the author's note, wanting to capture, like, the voice because they lived in Harlem for many years and heard voices like Lolly's firsthand, and how the vernacular in one Harlem neighborhood might not even be used in another Harlem neighborhood that's a few blocks away. So he really wanted to try to capture what it would feel like to be in Harlem. And I think he did a really good job of that because it felt very different to the way a lot of books are written and some of the words they would use and how they would talk. So I think that was interesting that he tried to really bring that to life. But it wasn't my favorite book. I didn't fly through it as quick as I was hoping to, but I still enjoyed it. Then I read some more of The Veiled Throne, and this is the one I didn't finish. I am now on page 628. So I still have a really big chunk of this to go, so I will be rolling it over into Whatever-a-thon. I am definitely really enjoying the story, though it still feels 4 stars for me. I am very curious as to how things are going to come together because you can kind of see that we're getting to the point where the whole, like, climax of this book is starting to kind of coalesce, and I'm very curious to see how that plays out, but this will have to wait for at some point in June when I decide to pick it up. I finished Aurora Burning, and like the first time, it made me immediately want to pick up Aurora's End. A few days later, I'm all right because I have so many books on my June TBR that I'm extremely excited for, so that helps. But that was what I was left with the first time I read this book, was just immediately wanting to pick up book 2. Hopefully, whatever the issue was with this book and my allergies won't carry on into book 3, but I still really enjoyed this the second time around, and I'm really glad I reread it because I had forgotten a lot of things. So I'm ready to read Aurora's End in June and finish off this trilogy. And then the last book I finished was the 1619 Project, and I'm giving this 4.25 stars because, I mean, it is a nonfiction novel, and I could have easily seen me reading this for, like, school, so there are points where it's a little on the dry side, but I still really, really enjoyed it, and I think I learned a lot by reading this and really had my eyes open and kind of have a better understanding of how Black people feel and the history that they went through and the reasons they look at the world the way they do. And like I think I've said in previous clips, there have been things like we fought in World War II and saw how the Jews were treated and said that was wrong, but then we're treating our own citizens the same way for a similar thing. And reading about, like, a church bombing where a couple of 14-year-olds died, and that happened when they were 14. They'd have been the same age as my parents, and that was during segregation. And, like, realizing that I'm one generation removed from that happening, which puts it in a completely different perspective, because seeing it happen in the 1960s makes it feel like ages ago. Seeing it happen when my parents were kids really makes it feel much closer and makes me realize how different my life would be had my parents been Black, because that would have been their life and how they would have shared stories about that with me, and it would have completely shaped the way I viewed the world, whereas I didn't have that because I was white. So I think that put it in perspective. They also mentioned, I want to say, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. It was definitely a medical experiment they did on Black people, where they basically withheld treatment, told them they were treating them, but didn't actually give them any treatment just because they wanted to see how the disease played out. And that ended the year my brother was born. So again, putting it in personal perspectives like that makes it feel much more real and tangible as to when exactly it happened, as opposed to just some random date. So I think that's crazy. I definitely think this is eye-opening. If you want to learn more, I would highly recommend reading this book because it was just fascinating and eye-opening, and I'm really glad that I chose to pick it up. So that's going to be the end of this vlog. I am very excited for Whatever-thon and to be getting into that. I just realized that it can't be Monday morning because this vlog is going till Wednesday. I'm so used to finishing them on a Monday that I did the same thing in my final book support group vlogs. I ended them at weird times because I had been on a different schedule for the previous set of vlogs, so I just ended them weirdly and then almost like screwed myself because like I tried to cut myself out of 2 days. So it is actually Wednesday morning. I've literally only been up like 10 minutes. I just wanted to get this film. So yeah, I'm doing great. I'm going to wrap this up so that I can start my Whatever-thon vlog. All of my social media is linked in the description below if you'd like to come chat with me. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me sleepy emojis because I am not awake yet. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!